The worst leader of them all, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. The illusion of democracy is very much kept alive. We are being ruled by leaders who claim that they are democratic leaders, and they force us to play along with their games. In fact, many people do so happily.
Dutch politician confronts Ursula von der Leyen on the spot, and what unfolded was a political detonation that exposed cracks the EU has spent years trying to hide. Because when someone finally says out loud what millions whisper about Brussels, the legitimacy crisis, the secrecy, the leadership no one voted for, the whole illusion of control starts to wobble. And make no mistake, this moment wasn't just a clash in a room. It was a warning shot that Europe's most powerful figure is no longer untouchable.
That no one ever voted for Ursula von der Leyen. No one ever voted for her, yet she is one of the most powerful people in Europe, and she's implementing some of the most destructive policies that our continent has ever seen.
She opened with the hit, Brussels fears most. The EU looks like a democracy, sounds like a democracy, sells itself as a democracy, but the person running it wasn't chosen by a single voter she governs. That's the nerve she sliced open. Europeans never voted for Ursula von der Leyen, yet they're expected to accept every law, pact, and regulation she pushes as if it's gospel.
Make no mistake, being a dissident now is just as dangerous as it was back then.
And that's why the anger snaps into focus. People are the ones paying the bills, losing farms, watching migration surge, and feeling their towns change, all while the most powerful figure in Europe stands on a platform they were never allowed to touch. Call it institutional procedure if you want, but to millions, it feels like a rule without consent. She didn't just attack Ursula's decisions, she attacked the entire structure that put Ursula above the public. And once that foundation is questioned, the whole system starts to shake.
And that is what makes modern-day tyranny arguably worse than what we see in the history books.
She didn't ease into it. She called the EU a modern tyranny, and people agreed faster than Brussels expected. Not because Europe has gulags or secret police, but because today's control is quieter and more calculated. Old regimes used force. This one uses polished speeches, rehearsed slogans, and respectable language to hide the pressure. It's the same fist, just wrapped in velvet.
That our continent has ever seen. Just to give you a few examples, she's the one who introduced the Green Deal, crippling our economy. She's the one.
Her point hit because it named the tactic everyone recognizes. Dissent isn't crushed violently anymore. It's crushed with labels. Extremist, misinformation, threat to democracy. You're not jailed, you're silenced, sidelined, and buried under bureaucracy. And by saying it out loud, she tore the mask off a system that punishes people not with brutality, but with quiet, relentless authority that's harder to see and even harder to fight.
Our regime uses pretty words to hide their intentions, but they pervert and invert our definitions all the time.
Then she went for the jugular, the Orwell point. The claim that the EU doesn't just make bad decisions, it rewrites the meaning of the words used to justify them. And she didn't soften it. She accused Brussels of flipping reality upside down, calling war peace, censorship protection, and political crackdowns defending democracy. It's the kind of accusation that sticks because people are already seeing it in real time. Every crisis comes with a new slogan. Every restriction comes with a noble excuse. Every policy failure comes wrapped in moral language that makes disagreement feel forbidden.
To maintain peace in Europe, we need to go to war with Russia. They say that to protect democracy, we have to ban right-wing parties, and they say that to safeguard freedom of speech, they need to censor disinformation.
And this is where the room shifted again. She basically said the EU treats language like a weapon, not to inform but to hypnotize. Not to communicate, but to sanitize. Every uncomfortable truth gets buried under a nicer, cleaner, friendlier word. Meanwhile, citizens are living the consequences those words were meant to hide. Rising bills, rising tensions, rising uncertainty. By calling it Orwellian, she wasn't being dramatic. She was pointing out the strategy. If leaders can control the language, they control the debate. And if they control the debate, they control the people. That's why this point hit so brutally. It exposed the one thing Brussels cannot defend, the gap between what they say and what people actually live.
Just like in Orwell's 1984, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
Then she aimed the spotlight at one person, Ursula von der Leyen, and stripped away every layer of diplomatic sugarcoating. No vague language, no institutions talk. She called Ursula exactly what millions across Europe quietly believe she is: the face, the vessel, the embodiment of a system that feels elite, insulated, and untouchable. In one sentence, she turned the entire EU bureaucracy into a single human target. And that's why the moment blew up.
The embodiment of that regime in one person in particular. The worst leader of them all, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Because when you stop talking about Brussels and start talking about Ursula, the conversation stops being abstract and becomes personal. Suddenly the policies have a name, the decisions have a face, the accountability has a direction. And that's the pressure point she stabbed into. Ursula isn't just a leader, she is, in their eyes, the symbol of everything people feel they can't vote out, can't question, and can't escape. In that instant, the confrontation stopped being a speech. It became a direct challenge to the throne. Once she put Ursula in the crosshairs, she unloaded the part Brussels hoped no one would say out loud, the policy hits that people feel every single day. No theory, no diplomacy, just the list of decisions that have turned Ursula into the most controversial figure in EU politics.
She's the one who introduced the Green Deal, crippling our economy. She's the one who introduced the Migration Pact, replacing our native population.
She started with the Green Deal, calling it economic sabotage, not because people hate clean energy, but because the rules were dumped on farmers, truckers, and small businesses with no transition, no breathing room, and no understanding of real-world margins. To many Europeans, it didn't feel like a climate plan. It felt like a financial chokehold. Then she hit the Migration Pact, framing it as a deal that brings chaos to local communities, while Brussels calls it solidarity. She tapped into a growing fear that decisions about borders are made by people who never deal with the consequences. Schools overflowing, shelters full, towns stretched thin, public safety questioned.
And now she's attacking our national sovereignty even further by introducing the Rearm Europe program, an 800 billion euro defense fund mostly used for Ukraine, a country that isn't and should never be part of the European Union.
And then she went straight for the 800 billion Rearm Europe plan, the biggest military push in EU history. Her point was brutal. People can't pay their bills. Inflation is crushing families. Housing is collapsing. Yet Brussels is pouring unheard of money into weapons, while citizens tighten their belts. The EU arms itself to the teeth. Then she shut down the idea of Ukraine joining the EU entirely, calling it reckless. Brussels sells it as destiny, but millions see danger. Economic, strategic, social. And when she tied these decisions directly to Ursula, it stopped being criticism. It became an indictment.
Not least, when are we ever going to see those text messages in which she closed a 35 billion euro deal with Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer?
Then she hit Brussels where it hurts. The missing Pfizer texts, a $35 billion deal with no trail, no records, nothing. And she didn't sugarcoat it. How can the EU track every citizen's messages for safety? But Ursula somehow can't find the texts she used to negotiate billions in public money. That question cracked the room open. Even EU watchdogs admit the deal reeks. Ursula struck a $35 billion contract through private messages with Pfizer's CEO, and those texts vanished the second journalists asked for them. The EU demands your data, but its own disappears when the stakes are highest.
Ursula von der Leyen thinks she is untouchable. She thinks she is above the law. But we are here today to remind her that she is not.
That's why this point hit like a sledgehammer. Citizens get surveillance. Leaders get selective amnesia. She turned a quiet Brussels embarrassment into a direct accusation. Where are the messages? And once that question was asked publicly, there was no hiding. Then she linked it to the EU's push for chat scanning, and that's when the hypocrisy became impossible to deny. Brussels wants to comb through every citizen's private messages for safety. Yet the Commission President's texts vanish the second money, power, or accountability enter the picture. If the public is expected to surrender privacy, why does Ursula get to operate in total secrecy? It's a double standard so blatant it doesn't need explanation. It exposes itself.
About what you have done? Do you think about the people who suffer because of your policies? Do you think about the people who have died because of a vaccine that you pushed on them, that you bought behind closed doors?
This is where the audience leaned forward because she said what no one in Brussels dares to say on record. Europe isn't just debating surveillance, it's normalizing it for citizens while exempting elites. And once that contradiction is exposed, the whole safety over freedom narrative crumbles. She made it brutally clear, in this system, the watched are the powerless, and the unwatched are the ones who control everything.
Think about the cries of the mothers who cry at night because their children were raped or murdered by immigrants that you let in.
She went straight to the human cost. Vaccine injuries left unanswered, migrant crimes dismissed, farmers pushed out by regulations, and families squeezed by rising prices. These were not policy debates. They were consequences people live with every day.
I will not stop fighting for them. I will not stop fighting for the truth, and I will not stop fighting for my people. The time of zero accountability will come to an end, and I will promise you, we will make Europe great again.
If you're still here, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. So the question is, does Europe wake up now, or is Brussels already too far gone?